and the world's largest soundstage at Pinewood Studios near London, home of the one man in the movies who needs no introduction anywhere.
My name is Bond. James Bond.
And now, for the 14th time in over 20 years, he's coming back in the most successful motion picture series of all time as Ian Fleming's secret agent 007 in A View to a Kill. Presented by producer Cubby Broccoli, the man who started it all with Dr. No, A View to a Kill stars Roger Moore as the legendary Secret Service agent with a license to kill. It marks the 7th time that Mr. Moore has played Mr. Bond. And as you know, 7 is a lucky number.
Yes, 7 times. Roger Moore will probably hold that record forever. Well, technically Connery did it 7 times too, if you count the unofficial Never Say Never Again. But Moore certainly holds the record for being the eldest actor to ever star as Bond. He was never intended to play Bond for such a long time though, as there were plans for him to leave before Moonraker, then with For Your Eyes Only, and then Octopussy. They just kept on asking the man back. And now, at 57 years old in 1985, Roger Moore was ready to shine one last time as our favorite secret agent.
MTV Music Television, and we're here 24 hours a day. I'm Nina Blackwood, and good morning. Coming up this hour, we have video from Madonna, also from Glenn Frey, and...
We've been introduced. My name is Moore, Roger Moore. And here's Duran Duran with some scenes from my new Bond film, A View to a Kill.
A View to a Kill was a title derived from Fleming's short story From a View to a Kill. They made it shorter for marketing purposes. To me, the original title would have been fine as it was. I mean, it wouldn't have been that much longer, and heck, we have had the title On Her Majesty's Secret Service and they never bothered to shorten that one. Anyway, in a year where blockbusters such as Back to the Future, Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Rocky IV came out, the 007 series were still tagging along and brought forward their 14th installment. Could it still deliver and hold up that special spark with an actor that was now reaching his 60s in times where Bond was no longer a trendsetter? Well, let's evaluate. We open up in Siberia. Bond is sent out to locate the body of Agent 003 to retrieve a microchip. Russian goons show up and start shooting, and we're immediately thrown into some action. It's pretty decent. John Barry's score for this film is terrific and very memorable, and even though lots of the action here is not exactly something new, like Bond skiing on one ski or skiing period, it's still enjoyable enough mixed in with some nice Bondian moments to warm you up and put a smile on your face. Your smile is soon demolished though, as the movie immediately punches you with a cheap gag. It's terribly cheesy and completely ruins the fun. It's actually pretty cool to see Bond surf over the water and outsmart the bad guys, but they just shit all over that by putting a Beach Boys song over an action scene, just to get a cheap laugh at the cost of a scene where audiences are supposed to be amazed. You have Roger Moore, you know you'll get the laughs in much more instances later on in the movie anyway. It's just a shame. So Bond soon outsmarts the rest of the villains and returns to a covert submarine disguised as a glacier. See, now there's your laugh anyway. A much better and more clever joke too. Of course, a hot chick is waiting for Bond and he gets it on and we're launched into the title sequence. And I'm not sure if I'm controversial or not, but it's my favorite title song in the series. pre-title sequence may have failed to warm me up, but I soon catch on here as I usually start swinging in front of the TV, because damn does Duran Duran's song kick ass. Maybe it's just because I'm a nut to 80s music, but whenever I hear this song I just feel proud to be a Bond fan. Anyway, on to the office in London we move. Moneypenny is dressed up in probably her most horrendous outfit in the series. I've touched upon it for a few reviews now, but Lois Maxwell is just getting way too old at this point in the series. They brought in a potential follow-up with Miss Penelope Smallbone in the previous film, but there seems to be no sign of her anymore. Speaking of getting old, a common critique that Roger Moore gets is that he's just too old in his later films. I've talked about him getting a bit long in the tooth before in this video, but to me Roger always looked fine in most of his later films. I'm not bothered by his appearance in For Your Eyes Only or even Octopussy, but in this one he just looks off. And that's because by this film he got a facelift and got that signature mole next to his nose removed too. He just looks so unnatural. And it doesn't help that he hooks up with lots of chicks who could easily be his granddaughter either. But anyway, Bond soon proceeds to M's office where Q is fiddling around with his spy robot, which is supposed to be this really high-end stealth equipment, but seriously, RC from Toy Story is more covert than that thing. And more dated 80s technology kicks in as the plot is presented. Computer microchips. The scene becomes one of those tutorials when you first start playing a video game, as it is explained to us what an electromagnetic pulse is, and how microchips, and thus all electronic devices, are rendered useless when they are exposed to such a pulse. Fortunately, a company has already made microchips for the British that can withstand a magnetic pulse, but, as is revealed from Q's high-end microcomparator, the Russians have now made identical microchips, because that chip that Bond retrieved from Siberia is an exact replica. The company that made these chips is called Zorin Industries, so someone in that company must secretly be working for the KGB. Bond suspects it's probably the head, Max Zorin himself. I mean, in Moonraker the head of Drax Industries turned out to be the bad guy too. You don't need to be a spy to know that the company's CEOs are usually the bad guys in these films. So pretty much the entire MI6 staff goes on to shadow this Max Zorin guy at some horse racing event in Ascot. And Zorin is indeed our main villain, played by the Oscar-winning Christopher Walken. And he also has a henchwoman, Mayday, played by Grace Jones. And besides microchips, our main villain apparently also has a big interest in horses. And his horse wins the race, despite not having the best odds. We're also introduced to Bond's ally, fellow agent Sir Godfrey Tibbett, played by the star of the Avengers, Patrick Macnee. And he knows that it's complete bullshit that Zorin's horse somehow won the race, and he has a hunch that he must be drugged, even if the tests prove negative. So something fishy is going on, and to learn more about these microchips and horses and Zorin, Bond starts his investigation in Paris, discussing these subjects with a French contact, who informs Bond that Zorin is holding a horse sale later that month. And then he's killed in a very elaborate way. So at first you're like, what the hell? The dude got killed by a fake butterfly? Really? And then it's like, oh wait, so it was a hook. Wait, what the hell? A tiny hook in his cheek killed him? Really? Fine, we'll just roll with it. The assassin was Mayday and Bond immediately starts chasing her up the Eiffel Tower. Bond does some terrible shooting and Mayday soon makes a jump. The stunt is pretty impressive, even if the diving board used for it is clearly visible. Of course, Bond doesn't give up the pursuit. Bond ends up destroying the top of his car and later it even gets smashed in half. And yet he's still somehow able to drive the car. How's that possible though, with the fuel tank of the car being in the back and stuff? Also, if there was ever a Bond film in which Bond's stunt double is the most apparent, it's gotta be this film. I know Roger Moore didn't exactly do much of the stunts by himself, but they don't even make an effort to hide it in this film. Anyway, Mayday ends up making a successful escape, but fortunately Bond's French contact told him Zorin was having a horse sale later this month, so together with Tibbett he goes undercover to pay the place a visit, posing as a millionaire by the name of St. John Smythe. And you just gotta love that name. If you're ever in a really fancy club and you don't want a random chick to have your real name, just use that one.
St. John Smythe.
So Bond and Tippett get escorted to their hotel room, and there's some great moments between Moore and McNee here.
Come along, Tibbet. Stop wheezing. Well, don't stand there panting, Tibbet. Start the unpacking. Here, let me help.
Yes, sir. Oh, thank you, sir.
Bond even has a cassette tape playing on which he is bossing Tippett around, as Zorin's goons are obviously listening in on his room. It's all great stuff. So later on, Bond is snooping around a little bit at the actual event and runs into Zorin himself for the first time, along with some Nazi scientists, Dr. Karl Mortner, and Mayday, who doesn't seem to recognize Bond, even though he was chasing her in Paris. Bond also soon finds out that a mysterious woman is having a private conversation with Zorin. So he starts spying on her using a pair of one of the most dated grandpa glasses that is also one of the most useless gadgets, as it apparently makes Bond see through windows a little better. Now that's a gadget all the kids want. So Bond finds out Zorin apparently is offering a $5 million check to this mysterious woman, who by the way turns out to be our main Bond girl of the film, Stacey Sutton, played by Tanya Roberts, who at the start is portrayed as another one of these mysterious, strong and independent women with zero interest in Bond, despite Bond using his A-game on her.
My name is James St. John Smythe. I'm English.
But really though, this does seem to be the most believable way a situation like this would naturally go. Bond is reaching his 60s and comes off as a pervert hitting on a chick who could easily be his granddaughter. Mayday is absolutely right for getting her away from this horny old man. So in the night, Bond and Tippett do some more snooping around at the horse stables and discover a secret lab. They find out that Zorin's horse is implanted with a microchip that responds to a performance-enhancing drug that is fitted in the jockey's whip. And some goons show up and we get a small fight scene. The first goon is easily beaten and the second one pretty much beats himself. It's really not a memorable fight scene at all. One that is definitely memorable, however, is the fight between Mayday and Zorin. I mean, Grace Jones, man, she's just so bizarre. But hey, I did say it was memorable. So Zorin soon gets an alert that someone has been snooping around in the horse stables, so they immediately go check on St. John Smythe. And then Mayday finally goes, "Oh yeah, he was the guy that witnessed me killing that French dude and was shooting at me at the Eiffel Tower and then followed me along in that car that got ripped off in half. Yeah, I knew he seemed familiar." And when she is about to go back to her room, it turns out Bond has snuck in.
I see you're a woman of very few words.
What's there to say?
It's a really clever yet disturbing little scene. Bond had no other choice but to go to her room to lower some suspicion of him, and the fact that she just goes in like that and fucks the crap out of Bond, it's probably the only instance in the series I wouldn't want to be in Bond's bed. The next day, Zorin soon finds out Bond's true identity using his state-of-the-art high-tech two-colored computer, and he plans to kill Bond in typical Bond villain fashion, by going horse racing with him while activating booby traps for Bond to overcome. Meanwhile, he also ordered Mayday to kill Tippett at the car wash, which is kinda sad, but it shows that these villains are more than just microchips and horses. And Zorin activates Bond's horse to go berserk using more of his microchip tech, and he ends up capturing Bond and things finally get serious.
You lost, 007.
Killing Tibbet was a mistake.
So Zorin ends up shoving Bond in his really expensive Rolls Royce to drown him in a lake. He could have just shot him or have him strangled in the same way that Tippett died. Or have Mayday bang him to death the night before. But they do it in this way, and they even stand around to make sure Bond actually drowns. And he ends up breathing the air from his car tires, and I'm not even sure if that's scientifically possible, but it does seem like a very clever idea. And Zorin becomes an even more interesting villain in the next scene, as it's revealed that he was indeed working for the KGB, as General Gogol shows up to tell him he was not authorized to kill 007. And Zorin opposes Gogol and is now a renegade, a psychotic madman trained by the KGB. It's a great villain concept. And his evil scheme becomes more interesting as well, as it turns out using his microchips for these horses was just a side plot. The real plot is to destroy Silicon Valley, the technological capital of the world, by causing an earthquake, which will cause his own microchips to increase in value, as so much microchips will end up being destroyed. It's pretty much an exact replica of Goldfinger's scheme to wipe out the gold in Fort Knox to have his own gold increase in value. Goldfinger's plan was called Operation Grand Slam. In this film it's Operation Main Strike. Even the scene is similar in showcasing a model of the target area to a group of investors and having one of them disagree with the plan and be killed off as a result. It's really a recycling of the same plot, but heck, that has happened before in the series. And I do kinda like the plot, but wiping out microchips just hasn't aged as well as doing it to gold. But in the context of the 80s it did work well.
Wow. What a view.
To a kill.
He said it! He said it!
Meanwhile, Bond has also gone to San Francisco and meets up with CIA agent Chuck Lee. Why not just have Felix Leiter though? Anyway, more background on Zorin is revealed as Chuck Lee explains that the Nazi scientist Dr. Mortar has done several biological experiments with pregnant women who were injected with steroids during World War II, and as a result, superbreed babies were born who were psychotic as a side effect. So not only is Zorin a KGB renegade, he's also the result of a biological Nazi experiment. It's really cool. Oh, and Maud Adams also makes a cameo in this scene, by the way. At night, Bond checks out Zorin's pumping station, which he will be using for his little earthquake. Bond sneaks around in scuba diving gear and soon finds out he's not the only one around doing so. Since Zorin is an ex-KGB agent now, the KGB is onto him as well. And one of their agents is attempting to record his conversation on a cassette tape. And another agent is soon discovered and thrown into one of the valves in a pretty horrific scene in which some more of Zorin's villainous manners are displayed again. The agent with the cassette tape turns out to be a chick that Bond has apparently met before on a previous mission. And so Bond decides to bang her again. I mean, Christ, that's the third young chick that our senior hero has sexed with in this film so far, and he hasn't even done the main Bond girl yet. At this rate, Q may as well have issued Bond with some Viagra pills. Also, I think this is a bit of a missed opportunity here. What other KGB agent do we know that Bond has worked with on a previous mission? That's right, Anya Almasova, Agent XXX. It would have been awesome to have Barbara Bach reprise her role here to add an extra layer to the film. Why not have an actual Bond girl return for once? It would be cool to have a familiar face be after Zorin as well and see them try to outsmart each other again, as is displayed in this scene when the KGB chick runs off with her cassette tape, only to find out it now has Japanese music on it. So Bond has secretly switched it and stole it for himself, so fair enough, there was some duty behind banging this chick, but really though, we find out little information, just that Zorin is planning some major operation called Main Strike, which we pretty much already knew anyway. The plot continues to be a bit on the slow side as Bond tries to find out more about these pumping stations and runs into Stacy again, our main Bond girl that Zorin tried to give the $5 million to, and we still don't know what that is about, so Bond follows her along to her big ass empty mansion. And he starts creeping up on her in the shower, but it turns out she was expecting Bond and has a gun. And really though, if you already had this dirty old man hitting on you at Zorin's event, and then you see him creeping up on you in the shower, this would again be the most logical and natural way this could play out from her point of view. She thinks Bond is another one of Zorin's goons, because a whole bunch of them show up to attack her house, but Bond proves he's on her side by pretty much killing all of these guys. So Stacy is then completely converted from the tough and mysterious girl to sweet, innocent and naive for the rest of the film. She starts explaining some useless background information on how she is a geologist and that Zorin tried to blackmail her with the $5 million check because he won some lawsuit concerning the shares of her father's oil company, causing Stacy to be broke, and that's why there's no furniture in their house and stuff, and it really adds nothing but a bit of unnecessary substance to the story. Oh, and the CIA dude, Chuck Lee, gets killed by Mayday. I guess that's why they didn't have Felix Leiter in this film. So Bond wants to find out more about Zorin's main strike operation, and to make things even more exciting, he and Stacy go out to the city hall to have a look at documents in folders. I'm at the edge of my seat here. And that's when we learn that Main Strike is an abandoned silver mine near the San Andreas Fault. And then things do get a bit more interesting again as Zorin and Mayday show up to frame Bond and Stacy by staging a crime. It once again displays some of Zorin's psychotic villainous nature.
But that means I would have to be
dead.
So Bond and Stacy get trapped in the elevator while Zorin sets the whole place on fire. And Stacy pretty much becomes the annoying as hell helpless damsel in distress with not a single grain of tough girl left in her.
James! Don't leave me! James! James!
There is a cool little moment when Bond rescues her though, when the crowds are all cheering and gasping at the city hall and the amazing score of John Barry is blazing out as Bond comes down the stairs heroically. But it's soon followed up by an extremely tacky fire truck action scene, as the San Francisco police is now after Bond and Stacy, because Zorin claimed they were criminals. And as usually is the case whenever American police officers are involved in Bond movies, they get portrayed as the stereotypical dumb fuck-ups who crash into each other and bring cartoony comedy relief. There really isn't anything suspenseful about the whole scene, and it's mainly meant for some cheap gags. Even the supposed big stunt in the fire truck doesn't get a payoff, as the stunt isn't even done for real. It's really disappointing and terrible. Anyway, Bond and Stacy find their way to Zorin's Main Strike silver mine and disguise themselves as a couple of miners. Luckily there just happens to be a conveniently sexy tailored female version of the outfit available for Stacy to wear. And they soon find out about Zorin's big plan to cause the earthquake using his pumping stations, but also a crap ton of explosives in the mine to flood Silicon Valley. They are soon discovered by Zorin, who sends Mayday after them, and as a precaution to make sure his operation succeeds, he closes down the mine and starts to mow down all his own workers with a machine gun. It's a controversial scene that's quite dark, but to me it's a memorable highlight that once again shows us the psychotic crazy nature of Zorin. The guy is having the time of his life committing a mass murder. It's unsettling, yet different and kinda cool for a villain. Meanwhile, Mayday is still chasing down Bond and Stacy, who seems to get more and more annoying by the minute. And Stacy's clothes are now conveniently stripped so that she can wear another sexy outfit for the climax scene. She does manage to make an escape, and Mayday and Bond end up getting trapped in the water together. So Mayday is left for dead and now switches sides and actually aids Bond to make sure Zorin's plan is foiled.
I have to hold the brake off! John! Get Zorin for me!
Mayday.
It's another highlight to the film and a great exit of a very freaky and memorable femme fatale. So Zorin's plan has failed and Silicon Valley is saved. So Zorin kidnaps Stacy, and I'll ignore the fact that Stacy is reduced to such a bimbo she doesn't even, notice the freaking Zeppelin sneaking up on her. But Bond should really be thankful to both villains. Mayday ultimately saved the day by getting that bomb out of the mine, and Zorin got rid of that annoying ass Stacy for him. Bond can just go home satisfied at this point. But Bond being Bond, he goes after Zorin to rescue Stacy. God knows why. So the climax takes place on the Golden Gate Bridge. Bond is hanging on a rope underneath the blimp and attaches it to the bridge, and one final confrontation follows on the top of the bridge's beams. It's a great setting, though the fight itself is a bit underwhelming. But Zorin's demise is easily the highlight to this sequence. You gotta love that little laugh he throws off just before he dies, showcasing us his complete lunacy one last time. It's a great end to a fantastic villain. So Bond is presumed dead by MI6 as he hasn't reported in yet, and Q is apparently out in the field to test out his high-tech stealth dog and sneaks into Stacy's shower. And here I was thinking Bond was the dirty old man.
That is not so.
Oh, James.
And so the film ends on a very cringy note, and we say our goodbyes to Roger Moore's time as James Bond. To me, A View to a Kill feels like a tired out Bond film, showcasing a period in which the franchise was in desperate need of renewing. A lot of it just feels very been there, done that. Most of the action is very tacky or has just been done better before. And I like Roger Moore. I think he gave a good performance in all of his Bond films, including this one. But to me, he just stuck around for one film too many. You know that once you start to disbelieve or cringe at all these young chicks immediately falling for this old guy reaching his 60s, that things are just stretched out a bit too far. And Roger Moore was never really believable in the action scenes to begin with, but man is it apparent in this film. Stupid noticeable stunt doubles. Stacy is just terrible. She's like Tiffany Case 2.0. She starts off as the strong, independent American tough girl and ends up being the dumb and helpless bimbo in the end. What really lifts this film up though are the main villains. Zorin and Mayday are extremely memorable. Heck, even casual fans that have only watched this film once will still remember that Christopher Walken and Grace Jones once were villains in a Bond film. They're both fantastic. The plot is okay and the climax is pretty satisfying, though I do have to say the first half of the film is just a bit irrelevant. Zorin's whole operation with his horses and the cheating really goes nowhere and has little to do with the ultimate operation to bring down Silicon Valley. I understand that it sets up the villain and it happens in other Bond films too, that we first see some smaller operations of the villain before the major one is revealed, but it's just such a long portion of the film and it's not that great. So much like Sean Connery, Roger Moore's final Bond film comes down to being one of the weaker ones. It was just really time for something new.